theyeshiva.net.
My dear friends, everybody say l'chaim, make yourself comfortable. Say hi to the person sitting near you, especially if you never met him before. And even if you met him before, you could tell him hi anyway. Afal pi shaloicha to Yisrael. Yeah? Afal pi shaloicha to Yisrael. I want to welcome Rabbi Pinson, Rabbi DovBer Pinson, who's gracing us as well. And welcome everybody who's here with us, Mikarev and Mirachik. So later in the segment, Rabbi Pinson is going to Farbrengen. We did announce, and I know a lot of people asked about it, there'll be some questions and answers. So we're now going to have a segment, give the mic to the audience, so to speak. And anybody can ask any question. You can address the question to an individual, or just throw it out in the air, and somebody will respond. Kiyad Hashem HaTova, a love. And the question could be anything you want. As said in the signs, any question you want. People have a lot of questions. And people ask me also questions. And if you don't want to speak out loud, you're shy, on Vasnusai, you're very humble, so you could text your question. You could text your question for this stuff and open our text. We're not so fancy to have it on the screen. But I'll give you a number and you could text it and I'll read it from there. 917-279-7579.
Another option is that if you don't want to think it's a question about you, you could just say, my friend asked.
Right. That's also an option. That's always a good option.
You're going to begin?
So I'm going to begin with a question. Again, if you want to text it, 917-279-7579, or you could say it. But I do want to ask one question addressed to my brother.
What's the number? How many years have you been waiting to ask this?
It's a friend of mine wanted to ask it. 917-279-7579. And you can ask whatever you want, it's fine. As my brother said, B'shimcha or B'shem Yechaver. So since it's Yud Shevat, I'm presenting this to my brother, one of the questions. You had the schus to spend many years by the Rebbe. You were one of the chayzim, the oral scribes of the Rebbe. Can you describe the most moving and emotional experience you had or saw by the Rebbe? Or one of the most moving or emotional experiences.
We're among friends. We can be vulnerable here. Is that a yes or no? Yes. Okay. We all love each other, right?
They're working on it.
I don't want to sound like a cliche and say there's so many and I'll just choose one, but that's true. So I'll just talk from my gut, just what comes to me, knee-jerk reaction. There were many, many moments because the Rebbe, as I spoke about earlier, represented, at least in my eyes, and I'm sure for many others, in their own way, a neshama on fire. So 24/7, every breath, every move was emotionally charged and was empowering. There was no such thing as ordinary. Every ordinary was filled with extraordinary. But on a personal note, when I was in my, around 17, 18 years old, and those are times you think about many questions, as I mentioned, formative years that can set you on a course that can change your whole entire life. So I remember vividly, Farbrengen, it was Shavuos Tovshin Lamed Hey. So that would be 1975. And I guess for me, that moment was the right thing I needed to hear. But I never forget it. This may not be as dramatic as some of you may expect, but it was for me extremely dramatic. And the Rebbe was speaking about Matan Torah and quoted the Gemara, the famous Gemara that Rabbi Yosef said, "Kama ilav hayem de kagorim," or not for this day, meaning Matan Torah, "Kama yesi ikar b'shuk." How many Yesis would be in the marketplace? In other words, there'd be a lot of Yesis. They'd all be like a bunch of regular guys. But Matan Torah transformed him. And the Rebbe explained, based on the Medrash, that what was the real Chiddush of Matan Torah? Not just the Jewish people became a nation, and not just that we got the mandate of God, Torah mitzvahs, mitzvah v'esa, and all that. But it transformed existence itself. That up till that point, in the words of the Medrash, which simply means that which was in heaven, Hashemayim Shemayim LaHashem, heavenly matters, sublime matters, belong to the world of the sublime. And material matters, Oretz L'Bnei Adam, belong to the world of human beings. And there was exeda, both a decree and also a schism between spirit and matter. What changed? That by Matan Torah, Vayered Hashem Har Sinai, V'Moshe Omer Alei Al Har, Moshe went up, there was a fusion of matter and energy. It's my own words, the original E equals MC squared. That energy and matter are one. That when you take a chefze, a physical object, an esrig, a klaf, animal hide, and you turn it into parchment, and you write the Asius of Stam, Sefer Torah Tefillin Mezuzah, with the right kavana, you forever have changed the hide of an animal. Has turned into kedusha, and can no longer kedusha lezazim can no longer can be reversed. You transform existence. I remember hearing the Rebbe say it, and this was young, impressionable mind, my own, and I literally felt like the Rebbe was sitting on one side of the curtain and seeing that change take place with his eyes. We don't see it. You do a mitzvah, you don't necessarily see physically a change in the esrog. But here's a man that sees it and is sharing what he sees. And I really, for the first time in my life, actually felt that our acts transform existence. Like you can take something that seems inanimate, completely static, dead, and make it come alive. Turn the physical matter into spiritual energy. And it left the impression on me that this is worth giving your life for. That your life and your actions, and each of our actions, have the power to transform. It's not just an act that we do. Till this day, I live with that because it gives you the sense of empowerment, also obligation and responsibility, that you really make a difference. And it's a small act. It doesn't have to be a big thing. So for me, this was an extremely emotional experience. As I said, not everyone may have had that experience. Many people were by that Farbrengen, but for me, it was life-changing. It was one of those moments that until this day I remember where I made a commitment that I will forever be part of this army. I mobilized myself. I said, I'm in. If that's what it's about, global change, physical transformation, come on. There's no greater thing you can do. That was my experience, brother.
Thank you.
May I ask you a question too? The same question I would return to you.
On your telephone?
No, saying it openly here. How about you? Same question, exactly the same question. Listen, if you're going to dish it out, you're going to have to take it,
One certainly very transformative moment for me was it was the night of Simchas Torah. Tafshin Mem Zayin, which would be 1986. I was a young yeshiva bocher, not many years after my bar mitzvah. And before the Rebbe would go for hakafis, he would hold a Farbrengen. Usually hakafis is after Ma'ariv. But actually, after Ma'ariv, there was a break. People made Kiddush. And then the Rebbe would start off Farbrengen 9 o'clock p.m., the night of Simchas Torah, when most people are already done with Hakafos, in the middle of the meal, he would start off Farbrengen. Farbrengen went for a few hours, till after midnight. During the Farbrengen, the Rebbe would usually explain all the psukim of Ata Haresa. 17 psukim, I think. And Hakafos, and a lot of other subjects. After that, there was a break, because they had to take out the benches and tables for Hakafos. So Hakafos would start around 1 or 1:30 in the morning. That's when Hakafos would start. It could go for a few hours. The Rebbe would dance Simchas Torah incredibly, for hours. In the earlier years, my brother said he would come back later for a niggin, to teach a niggin, like 5 or 6 in the morning. But already when I was there, that he didn't do. But Hakafos could go, I remember one year till 3, even later. That year, at the Farbrengen Simchas Torah, the Rebbe discussed the end of Chumash, because Simchas Torah we finished Chumash. And he asked a fascinating question. I still remember the question. The last words of Chumash, the whole Chumash ends with La'enei Kol Yisrael. It speaks about Moshe's death and the eulogy for Moshe. Everything he did, the miracles, Chala Oisis, V'amoivsim, Ayad HaChazakash, Asa Moshe, La'enei Kol Yisrael. So Rashi goes through all the miracles, and he says, what's that last one? La'enei Kol Yisrael. Sheshavar haluchis le'neiim. He broke the luchis before the eyes of the Jewish people. And Hashem agreed and thanked him and said, Yashikaychecha sheshibarta. I remember the Rebbe asked, the whole Gemara, people just finished the Siyam Hashas. Masechta Nida doesn't finish about Nida. It finishes Kol Hashayna halachis muftach le'shaben olam haba. So Rashi and Tosfos says, you wanted to finish the Gemara on a positive note. L'sayim b'divrei shvach v'tamchumah. So the Gemara puts in something that's not relevant to Masechta Nida directly to finish on a positive note. Shas. So according to Rashi, the whole Chumash, Torah Shebiksav, finishes with what? With one of the most catastrophic moments in Jewish history, when Moshe had to break the luchas because of the Chet HaEgel. Even if he had to do it, that's the end of the whole Torah, and it's the end of the eulogy that Hashem gives for Moshe. Like the highlight of his life. The highlight of his life is Matan Torah, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf. The highlight of his life was the greatest tragedy when he had to break the luchas. And Rashi himself finishes with the word Sheshibarta. That's the last word of Rashi on Chumash. You broke. The Rebbe elaborated a lot on the question, but I want to bring out one point. Then the Rebbe started the answer. Middle of the answer, he started to sob. A type of sobbing that you only see with little children. You don't see adults cry this way. Besides very tragic situations, Rahman al-Islam, or maybe very, very joyous situations. He was sobbing so hard that he couldn't control himself, so to speak. And usually he would stop. When the Rebbe used to cry, not seldom, but he would stop, gain his composure, and then continue. But here, the sobbing was just like non-stop, so the Rebbe just continued speaking. While he was sobbing, it was hard even to hear the sikh, hard to hear the talk. What was he sobbing about? He brought out one point. Why did Moshe break the luchas? He broke the luchas, Rashi says in Kisisa, because the luchas were the marriage contract between Hashem and the Jewish people. The Jewish people, so to speak, committed adultery. They betrayed God 40 days after the marriage, after Matan Torah. So Moshe breaks the marriage contract. He breaks the ksuva, so there's no evidence that they were ever married. So you could tell Hashem, what do you want? They're not married to you. They're not married to you. So then it's not so terrible. They were never connected to you. That's why he broke the marriage contract, the shtar of betrothal between the Rebbeinu Shalom and the Jewish people. So he broke the luchas in order to save the Jewish people from extinction, because Hashem said there's no room for them anymore after such an act of betrayal. The Rebbe said, by Moshe, the most precious thing in the world was Torah. Moshe is Torah. Torah is Moshe. It's called his Torah. Especially the luchas that Hashem himself made. So there was nothing more precious to Moshe than the luchas. The luchas were like Hashem himself, anon nafshik savas yehavas. And then there was a choice Moshe had to make. The Jewish people who sinned, and not many, 3,000. So he said, Moshe didn't ask anybody. He didn't even ask Hashem. And he took the most precious thing that he knew is the most infinite precious thing, and he broke it. Why? Because of his love for the Jewish people. And that's the end and the climax of the whole Torah. That's the greatest thing of Moshe Rabbeinu, beyond everything else. Even Torah itself. How does Torah conclude? It concludes with Moshe's infinite love to the Jewish people that's deeper than everything else, because Torah itself finishes with the point that the whole Torah is for the Jewish people. Quoted Eliyahu Hanavi in Tanan de Eliyahu Rabbi. Eliyahu Hanavi says, the world says, two things precede the world, Torah and Yisrael. But which one comes first? So the world says, Torah comes first. Vani Omer, Eliyahu Hanavi says, Yisrael Kadma. Jew is the highest thing, is one with Hashem. And the Torah allows the relationship with Hashem to be experienced fully. But if there's no Jew, and you have to choose between the two, Moshe Rabbeinu was ready to break the luchas themselves. He spoke around a half an hour about this, and this sobbing. You're just standing there, I'm looking at this, and it was so transformative. First of all, to see how a Rebbe speaks, to see how to learn a Rashi, to see how to learn a Chumash, but to understand the dedication of a leader, of a shepherd to the Jewish people, to understand what a Jew is, what Avos Yisrael means, what dedication to the Jew is, to see how the whole Torah, if it undermines your Avos Yisrael, you're missing the point. That was certainly a very powerful moment in my own, I would say in my own development as a human being and as a Jew. On an anecdotal fashion, and more humorous, and forgive me, I know it's mamash lahavdil ben kodesh l'chol in a serious way, but that night something else happened. How do I know? I wasn't a sports fan then. I'm not a sports fan now, even though I spoke at halftime. But that night the Mets won. After 25 years, how do you know? 86? Huh? They won twice, yeah? No, it's not 69, this is 86. So there was a fellow, he was so excited the Mets won, yeah. He came running in from outside. He came running, and he gave a scream. The Mets won. And I heard it. And the Rebbe was in the middle of sobbing about the breaking of the luchas. And I'm like, wow, the contrast of two worlds. That was just something else that happened then also. I happened to hear. This Jew today is a very, very successful rabbi because he's extremely social. He's a very sociable person, and he loves people, and he's very successful. Stop. On a more humorous note.
Yeah, perhaps the contrast you just pointed out, Rabbi. It's 75 years since the end of World War II, 70 years had the Farbrengen of the Rebbe, indeed, the revolution, and Yiddishkeit has bounced back. The three of you have thousands of followers, there's thousands of shluchim. This shul has 18 scheduled minchas, where this was farmland a few years ago. Yiddishkeit is booming everywhere. Look at the real estate prices here, Monsey, are all over the place. Yiddishkeit is booming. On the other hand, intermarriage is also booming, unfortunately. Intermarriage, amaratzis, ignorance, apathy of the derech b'chul. We have a bifurcation like never before. Yiddishkeit is booming, and the opposite is booming. How do the three of you also have thousands of followers, if I didn't mention it, on the one hand. How do the three of you foresee the future of Yiddishkeit? The same thing, I believe, is in Eretz Yisrael, between Ohr Chaim or whatever. How do the three of you foresee the future of Yiddishkeit? You know, Mashiach has to come tonight, no doubt about it. But how do you foresee the future of Yiddishkeit given this clear bifurcation?
So first of all, everyone heard the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, all the videos. If there was no video, it didn't happen. Hello. Briefly, the question was, how do we see the future with such paradoxes that on one hand, you see such a renaissance of Jewish life. On the other hand, you see so many problems. Is that the way you summed it up? Yeah, there's worse than that. Well, first of all, we Jews are not afraid of paradoxes. We've always had paradoxes. Pichsidis and Kabbalah is the concept. There's always zelu mazeh. Whenever there's strength in one area, there's always the other side has equal strength. But I'll just cite a very powerful talk since we're celebrating Yud Shevat. Let's do it through the Rebbe's lens. Purim Tov Shemem Zayin. Again, Purim in the year is 1987. Very classic talk, very powerful, passionate talk about Mashiach. So one of the Rebbe spoke about is the Posuk in Daniel. That one of the signs of Gula, there are many signs, one of them is Yizbaru v'yislabnu advarim, which means there'll be clarity, clarification. So most people would think that if you don't see evil, you don't see bad things, it's better than if you see it. No, absolutely not. Because concealed, it can camouflage itself, it could hide behind the echad b'pechad b'lev, someone smiles to you and then they stab you in the back, God forbid. You'd rather want to know your enemy. Hidden enemies are the worst. They're invisible. So the mere fact that things start emerging that seem almost antithetical to anything that's really godly doesn't always mean that we're going backwards. It could be we're going frontwards. Like the example, the tzikek data is an example and brought in Gemara and Chassidus cites it, that when a pot is cooking, so what happens? When it's finished being cooking, the last remnants begin to smolder. So it's like going to Auschwitz. So you first extract the grime from the pores, and then when it gets hotter, you get more grime. So when you start seeing things that are sometimes antithetical, it could actually be a sign that this is like the end of the road. So we say, on one hand, these are the lowest souls, ikvis de Mashiach, but on the other hand, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we come the cumulative mitzvahs and Mesiras Nefesh of thousands of years. So are we greater than they are or not? We're greater with their strength. So on one hand, we ourselves as individuals, as my brother mentioned earlier, can be small people, but we come with tremendous keiches from all the generations before us that give us power. This is more of a philosophical explanation on the paradox. It shouldn't bother us, because the most important thing, we know the Eden, when they came to Yamsuf, they broke into 4 kittas, and they were all wrong, because to start waxing eloquent and philosophical shittas is not the approach. What's the answer? Vayiso. Our job is to move forward. We could sit and debate the challenges of our times and so on. What we need to feel empowered, especially on a day like Yud Shevat, is to take the keiches and vayiso to move forward. I think it was the Maggid's son, the Rabbi Avram Malach, that told the Alter Rebbe, who was being criticized by some that he's just teaching so much chassidus. What about the animal, the neshama, the nefesh habamis? You have to deal with it. And he had a great expression. He said, "For guck nicht auf the Pferd." So you move. Don't look at the behemoths. Don't look at the Pferd, the animals. That doesn't mean we ignore our challenges, but it means we don't let it bring us down and stop us. It's a tremendous lesson, a powerful lesson that the Rebbe taught. Because if you start doing that introspection until you're going to get yourself figured out, like they say, why is there no mitzvah, bracha, and tzedakah? Because by the time you make a bracha, you have to go to the mikveh first, and then there's kavonis. By the time the person needs tzedakah, who knows what's going to happen? There's times where you sow chatef achel, chatef shti, which means now is a time we believe that was the end of a process of thousands of years. So now is the last sparks. The last sparks are the deepest ones, but sometimes also are hidden in very dark places. You see, listen, you don't have to talk more about, I don't want to say the numbers, but the majority of Klal Yisrael are not Tineka Shenishbu today. Not a small number. So you could say, what's going to happen? Well, we don't know the mysteries, but we know that we come from generations and generations of keiches. We have to keep forging ahead. And there's the shailas, the questions, but yisparu yislabna hadvarim. So any negative thing is considered to be part of forward progress. And our job is to finish the marathon, to carry the baton and cross the finish line.
But if anybody wants to ask live, texts.
Do a good controversial one. Better wake up to Abram.
Somebody writes, I started doing Kiruv recently by inviting guests for Shabbos, mostly guys who grew up in religious communities, but then they left Judaism. They love coming, but they enjoy the food and they go back home. It seems to me I'm accomplishing nothing besides giving them a good meal. How do I inspire them to the next level? My wife asks another question. What effect is this going to have on my children seeing Jews driving on Shabbos, amongst many other things that are inappropriate for a Jew? Perhaps it's the wrong thing to invite these people for Shabbos. First of all, they're not growing, they're just eating and leaving. And second of all, it's perhaps a very negative example for my children. You deal with this all the time.
What do you deal with?
You have guests every Shabbos, you have 30 guests, 40 guests, They also come for your wife's food, so.
Since again we want to all quote the Rebbe tonight, not just so. There was a Garisha Chassid, Satmar Chassid by the Rebbe from London in the 60s, and he asked a similar question, not mamish those aces, those words, but similar. I think the answer, and he was like challenging the Rebbe in a way. That what is this behavior of sending people to go deal with Peishi Yisrael, sinners? We have so much work to do with our own communities, and when you go deal with those type of people, you can get contaminated, it can bring you down, and then it's like drowning victims, and you drown with them. And the Rebbe listened patiently and then said to him, let me ask you, and not Chaz v'Shalom, I'm suggesting it this way, but let me ask you a question, hypothetical question. If it was your brothers and sisters, or your children, who were the drowning victims, or the what you call peshe, would you also have this attitude? So he was taken aback, and he said, well, if it's my family, it's my responsibility. So the Rebbe said, Kol Yisrael are not one mishpacha. All Jews are not one family. The Rishalmi says that we're like organs in one body, the right arm, the left arm, and that if one Jew is missing by Matan Torah, there would be no Matan Torah. My brother mentioned you could have 9 Moshe Rabbeinus, you don't have a minyan. Chalbana, even the so-called smelliest and negative part of the Keteris is necessary. The point is that for some odd, bizarre reason, and we can explain it and analyze it, I'm not going to go analyze it, we think there's an us and them. We grew up in a frum home, and they didn't. And even when we have a little rachmanis, it's also condescending. Oh, I'm going to be benevolent, I'm going to welcome them to my home. First of all, people feel that, even if you don't say anything. Second of all, it's a sheker muchlet. First of all, you were born into a family. You didn't even work at it. How do you even know how frum you are? Maybe it's cultural. You grew up with it. If you grew up at Tinik Shenishba, would you also be keeping Shabbos? You wouldn't even know that it exists. So the Eibishter gave you a bracha. Maybe he gave you a lower neshama because you couldn't handle such a challenge. The Alter Rebbe writes in Perek Lamed Beis, Mi yedei gdulasnu malasan. Do we know neshama? Who's the greatest neshama sitting right now in this tent? Besides the 2 rabbis on my side, which they will tell you, the first ones to tell you that what I said is a joke. One of the first things we learned, and I saw this with the Rebbe, and this is Chassidus, there's no such thing, we don't know. Who knows who's the greatest neshama? Anyone's a mumcha neshama here? Expert. You think a neshama is the best one, the one that davens longest or is the most pious? It depends what challenges they have. If that's what you grew up, that's maybe mitzvah sanoshim ulamada. I'm not taking away. It's a bracha. But how do you know what challenges people face? This attitude is essentially part of the Chassidus revolution, that the Baal Shem Tov recognized that a split was emerging. Scholars thought they were superior to Anoshim Pshutim, and since when? Shomesh and Asativ in Teherihi, is there any person that's not supposed to say that bracha? I once asked a Meir Sha'arim rabbi, Rov, who was very critical of dealing with anyone that's outside the fold, so to speak. So I said, let me ask you, you're a Pesach. If a Tinuk Shenishbor, any Jew, Chmor Litzlan, whole his life, there was not Mekayim Teda mitzvahs. Even though, I don't know if it's possible someone should do any mitzvah, but hypothetically. And then he comes to you and he says, I want to daven tomorrow morning for the first time in my life. I'm 90 years old. I never davened before. Should he say Neshomish and Nesati B'Teherihi, or he skips that prayer? He looks at me, he was an older man. He says, Mr. Chochem, you're like a wise guy. He says, you know the psak on that? Of course he says it. So I said, so what he's saying is, Broch Levatola? Dvarim B'Telim? You know, he never thought about it. This big rough. And I have to share one more thing. I give a class every morning in my house. It's Ayin Beis. Rab Shlomo Tachtel comes to this class. He's the grandson of
Ima Bonim Smeich.
His grandfather's name is also Shlomo.
He was killed, yeah. The B'Sacher Shlomo.
Yeah. He fell out of favor in some circles, but nevertheless. He tells me a story in Yerushalayim, Mitsuyonim. So you can imagine how they looked at everybody else. One day, he tells me, this is probably 19 Tavsheh Chavav Chafei, wanders in an American boy with a big head of red hair. They're called hippies. A hippie. American, he wanders in there, and everyone's looking at him like, you know, like a Shana Habriya, so I don't know what they were going to make him, whatever. And he spoke English, he didn't speak Hebrew or Yiddish. So one of them who knew a little broken, what can I help? He says, they told me that if I want to find out about God, I should come to a city called Yerushalayim. And I came. You know, he's a Tmimizdik guy. And in Yerushalayim, I started asking people, who can tell me something about God? They said, go to that yeshiva. That's where the genius are, the experts. So I'm here. Can anyone tell me about God? I kid you not. Reb Shlomo told this story, and Bamish, he was there. And they all look at each other. Enu Koktaf and Tzvei says he wants to know Asugi and Chatzishir. No problem. God? Anybody here knows about God? I'm not exaggerating. So someone says, so Shleim Irakedish, mind you, you know. This red-headed guy doesn't know what he's facing here. And one guy says, I think there's a guy in the Chabad section, his name is Osher Lemel Cohen, and I think he knows something about God. They found one guy in Yerushalayim that may know. The Eibishter. This is a Ben Shlem. Okay, so you know what happens? They take the guy with the red head. Plus, Shlomo Tachtel, there was also Chetzkel Sefer, and there was also Ezra Shachar, I think, was around that time too, a few. And the son of the Rosh Yeshiva, 6 guys going Talucha. They're going to find this rare Jew in the world, in Yerushalayim, the holy city, that's going to talk about God. And they said, okay, you know what, we'll go by lunchtime, whatever. Take 10, 15 minutes. They sat down with him, they found him, as a shtibel. And yeah, no problem. He starts talking, there's a translator. They found someone that can translate. I don't exaggerate when I tell you, I think Krishna had said, for 3.5 hours, he spoke about the Eibishter. He said, that's just the beginning. They were shocked. Not the redhead, the other guys. They never heard someone talk about the Eibishter for so long. What can you say already? He's done Eibishter, Bashaf and the Welt. He gave us Teda Mitzvahs. What else is there to say? Well, anyway, they came back and he said to them, you want to learn more, you have to learn Chassidus. Why am I saying all this? I'm Meirich Kavanah here. Yeah, you could learn a Kol HaTeira Kula and not know there's an Eibishter, not know what a Neshama is. One of the gifts that Chassidus taught us is the Baal Shem Tov in simple ways is you have a Neshama. And because of that, it changes to answer the question then, and I wanted to be Meirich because I don't want to just answer a short answer. It's a Yisod. It's a Yisod in everything. You invite Jews to your home, who for whatever reason, the Eibishter in his mysterious ways, they were born to homes and families that they don't know what Shabbos is. Not they know when they're this. They don't even know what it is. They don't know what Yom Kippur is. They don't even understand. Even if you tell them, they have such negative impressions. You invite them to your home for a Shabbos, and they eat a kosher meal. They make a bracha. They wash their hands. even if they don't know what they're doing, you may have changed all the world more than all the fruma people who doesn't take any effort to do it. So who's here to judge? They drove on Shabbos. I'm not saying we're matter that, but mitzvah gereres mitzvah. It's a neshama. It's a neshama that's lost. So when you look at that person as a neshama, instead of asking these patient Yisrael that came and what kind of effect it's going to have on them and on us and our family, why don't you think of them? These are your brothers and sisters that have neshamas. The Eibush to send them to this world and put them in very deep challenges, and you have this chus that they should sit at your table. This is your family, your brothers and sisters. So when you take that attitude, the question B'chlal is not even a question. What's the shayla? Invite them again. Talk more. You know what? Let them challenge you. You challenge them, and maybe they'll teach you a few things. I learned the most from people who did not grow up with Yiddishkeit because it's sincere. They didn't grow up with it. It's comfortable for them. When they make a change, it's like imagine. And I can tell you a lot of Chredesh didn't tell me. Why would they become frum? What's the matter with them? If I had a choice, I never would have chosen this life. People have told this to me off the record or on the record. Why are they doing this? Mishugoyim. You know what? They have taka neshama, and maybe Teda is true after all. You know, not just something we grew up with. Maybe there is a God, and maybe they do have a neshama. I mean, maybe I'm saying maybe Beloshen Tzachos, and frankly, maybe that's what they in a mysterious way sent us brothers and sisters who don't know. So they can teach us a few things, and they take for granted what we have. So to me, that's the approach. And Aid is Aid. You do a mitzvah with them, you can never know what it could do. This is why the Rebbe, the mitzvah film, people say, mitzvah film, Pesha Yisrael, well, look what he's going to do a minute or after suddenly a guf noki he doesn't have, and suddenly putting on film, because the Rebbe looked at the neshama, is a neshama, a mitzvah touches the neshama. And that mitzvah, geredes mitzvah. It's a whole different way of looking at Yiddishkeit. It starts with God and neshamas. It doesn't start with behavioral, robotic behavior. It starts with the neshama, the Eibush, the neshama comes lamata. Torah mitzvahs are the tools that help nourish a neshama, and every mitzvah will lead to another mitzvah. That would be my longer answer. How long do I have? Okay, I'm done with that. We should challenge each other that we could answer something in 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Is that possible?
Amen. Can you use
You get my brachas.
Let's sing a niggun and we'll continue. Let's sing one niggun. So geschmack in it.
And Nigel will answer more questions.
The bottom. It's nicht Pasha to sein a Pasha to eat. It's not simple to be a simple Jew. The Baal Shem Tov used to say, the pshittas von a ish Pashat is ein Zach mit pshittas ha'atzmos, which means the pure, unadulterated simplicity of an authentic Jew is completely one with the pure, undiluted, undefined quintessence of Hashem, without the adjectives. You hear? Remember the president of Israel, his name was Salomon. He was a secular Jew, left-wing, socialist, mapainik, first education minister, but he was named after the Balatanya. Because his family came from Chabad Chassidim. But he himself, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, drew him very close. And he impacted a lot of things in Israel through him. Indirectly, most people didn't know, but they became very close. And later in his life, I think he started to put on tefillin, and he came closer to Yiddishkeit. So when he would come to America as president, he used to come to 770. So once he came, it was in the early 70s, I think, and a lot of Jews came out from Russia then. 72. I think the next year he came, and he tells the Lubavitcher Rebbe, this was on the radio, they played it on the radio in Israel because a reporter recorded it, that's where I heard the recording. He says, there's a whole immigration that came out from the Soviet Union. He says, Mamish Amaratzim. Those were his words. Really ignorant Jews because they were under communists. They were in the under the Bolsheviks for since 1917. So they were there for, a half a century at that point, or more. So they grew up completely without Yiddishkeit, no schools, no shuls, no infrastructure, no communities. This is communism. It was the worst of the worst. So he said, Azelcha Amiratzen, Proste Yidden, he said, Proste Yidden. Proste means, plain, like peasants, Prost. Not gross, but more crass, very simple, very peasant-like. Amiratzen. Boors. So the Rebbe interrupted him, and he said, "The Shver hat ze gerufen anoshim pshutim." My father-in-law wouldn't use this word, proste Yidden, boors, or amiratzim. He would use the word anoshim pshutim, which means Jews who are rooted in simplicity. As he went on to the conversation, Shazar kept on saying, amiratzim, proste Yidden. And the Rebbe kept on telling him, Zok anoshim pshutim. He didn't want to hear that expression. Anoshim pshutim. Anoshim pshutim, it's a very different idea. Prost means you're a peasant. Poshet means you're simple. But in that simplicity, there's a purity that touches God's simple. God is also simple. In the Svarim of the Rambam, Hashem is defined as poshet. Not because he's simple, he's not sophisticated, because he's beyond sophistication. So even when a person is simple, because they don't have the sophistication, if that simplicity is authentic, it touches the simplicity that's beyond sophistication. And all the sophistication is there to bring you to that experience of simplicity, because God is not sophisticated.
Reminds me of a story, my brother just reminded me. I heard this from Rabbi Tzvi Greenwald. There's a big asking in Israel, Israel. And when the first Knesset, so they had different parties. So there were Jewish communists. Jews, for some reason, like to be communists at some point. So his name was Meir Vilner. He was a Jewish communist, and he was hated by everybody because he misrepresented. He was like Stalin. Stalin was still around in the early 50s, and he was loathed because he would represent everything opposite what Jews are. But he was a Jew. So there was a newspaper writer who wrote an article, and he wrote about Meir Vilner, and he said, Meir Vilner, I missed one point. So one day, Meir Vilner was leaving his office, and someone went over and stabbed him, because he was so hated. So the writer writes that the stabber made two mistakes. He should have dug deeper in, and he should have turned the knife. That's what he wrote. That writer came to New York for Tishrei, and he ended up in Crown Heights, at Lubavitcher Rebbe. He goes by Lekach, that Yom Kippur to get honey cake. And the Rebbe says to him, I guess that they introduced him to who he is. So the Rebbe said to him, without blinking, without referring anything, he said, Nicht azeh schreibt nach Yidden. You don't write like this on a Jew. And then he looked at the Rebbe like he was taken aback. The Rebbe knew, etc. And the Rebbe said, "Vos ha'id is that men reden sukkos." So he thought that the Rebbe was inviting him to come to a meeting. So he goes to Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary, and the Rebbe says he wants to talk to me about Eid. My article, sukkos. So Rabbi Chadakov says, the Rebbe's chief of staff, there's no yechidus. You don't go there. Sukkos Yom Tov. There's no time after Tishrei. That's when the guests come and see the Rebbe. He says, but the Rebbe said sukkos. I'm trading back them sukkos. So he said, okay, I'll double check. He checks. He says, no. There's no yechidus. The Rebbe probably meant that you should come sukkos. The Rebbe talks on sukkos. He didn't say he's going to call you in private audience. He's going to talk about it. So he came. The sukkah, the Rebbe would talk in the sukkah a few times during sukkahs. And he walks in. Sukkah was relatively small. It wasn't a very large sukkah. And as soon as he walks into the sukkah, the Rebbe in his own way weaved into his talk. As he saw him standing there, the Rebbe says, "Vos is Ayid, like continuing what he said by Lakach Vosis Ayid. And the Rebbe brings the Sof Masech Techkike, a Peish Yisrael Malay Mitzvahs Kerimen. That even though it's Peish Yisrael, he's filled with Mitzvahs Kerimen. The Rebbe said, why that Kerimen? Why is the example that even a sinner is filled with seeds, pomegranate seeds. But why? Why pomegranate? Dimin. It says because the seeds in a pomegranate are different than seeds anywhere else. They're separated by very thin membranes. So the seeds are there, but they're not completely internalized. Like, look, for example, other seeds are inside the heart of the fruit. Here they're membranes, like layers. Because he's not integrated, but he has full of mitzvahs. And the Rebbe goes down to elaborate on this. Brought the famous Gemara that says that in Eretz Yisrael, Reiv Yisrael, Reiv Ganvi Yisrael, that in Eretz Yisrael, most of the Ganovim are Jews, because most of the people living there are Jews. So this is what's used by a lot of people to say negative things about Jews. When Robert Maxwell was attacked for his behavior, that's what they said, that most Jews are Ganovim, Reiv Yisrael Ganvi. So the Rebbe said, no, the word is not Reiv Yisrael Ganvi. It says that even if he's a Ganev, Reiv of him is Yisrael. That's how the Rebbe touched it. That the Reiv is Yisrael. So it's always how you look at the perspective of every person. Now we talk about Noshim Shutim, we're talking Tinuk Shenishba, like I mentioned before, which shall be Rambam Pi Aloch, is not the getter of Schar Nevish. So it's not even an anus, it's not even a shegig, it's a person doesn't know. It's a whole different category. So the Chaim to the Anoshim Shutim, each one of us, halavai we should all be like the Baal Shem Tov once says, Pesi Yam and L'chol Dover, Pesi Ze Moshe Rabbeinu. Halavai Mezol Zayin Nap Aish Pashat. That's what he says. L'chaim. Mendel Marozov's son, a daughter got engaged. Because it's in New York, Reb Choni Marozov's son, one of the big Chassidim, says his daughter got engaged. So someone said, they got engaged to Baal Tshuva. How do you're like Geza. You're like pure blood. You're blue blood. Did you let your daughter get married, engaged to Baal Tshuva? So he said, Mendel looked at him very seriously. He said, "Wer ist dich gebracht gekocht? Und hat nicht getan, als viel Tshuva wie viel man meint." That's what he said. He didn't do that much Tshuva.
Translate.
I said, how do you let your daughter marry a Baal Tshuva? You should marry a tzaddik. So he said, I checked, and he didn't do that much tshuva. It's all right, it's not so much tshuva going.
Okay. This person wants an answer from all three, and I was just suggesting should be each one should be a 40-second answer.
That's good.
Okay. My whole life is filled with anxiety. Welcome to the club.
That's a 10-second answer.
I just don't have serenity. My brain does not stop working, and I'm always anxious. I'm always second-guessing myself, questioning myself, feeling guilty. I don't know what you want to call it, trauma, anxiety, about a lack of any menuchas hanefesh. Could you give me, what would the Lubavitcher Rebbe tell me if I asked him this question? How can I help myself?
Look, from right to left. 40 seconds.
Mr. B'chair.
Pishnayim. Of what? Of the chavis.
Of the 40 seconds.
I'll do the 40 seconds because actually I saw recently an answer from the Rebbe to someone who writes something similar. I'll just quote it and then we'll move on. He writes, someone writes to the Rebbe that he's filled with problems and problems and problems. And the Rebbe responds like this. It was not in person, it was in a note. The Rebbe writes, it's time for you to stop thinking about yourself so much and go out there and help other people. That's the gist of it. When you start helping other people, you won't be thinking about yourself, so you won't be thinking about your anxieties. That's the punchline.
Okay.
I reserve my 20 seconds for an impeachment trial for later. Okay.
Okay.
So say that. So say it.
For the record.
Aman Eno B'Srei. Of course, it's the correct answer. It's definitely what makes sense that everyone answered. Like you said, Vayisol. It's like people are busy with their lives and they're busy. You have to think about what the Eibusher wants from you, not what you need from the Eibusher. And when you think about what the Eibusher wants from you, you move forward.
You're going to explain how we have to be sensitive to the other side. It was a setup, and now we're going to hear how sensitive we have to be to people who are with anxiety and trauma and so on. By the way, the
last 20 seconds.
No, the Rebbe did not shale that. He was not suggesting not being compassionate. He was giving actually practical advice. That's the bottom line. But go ahead, go take yours.
I would just add, I would say as an addition, not as a contradiction, but as an addition. Sometimes a person's anxiety is rooted in reasons that they're not conscious of. And they cannot deal with it through conscious methods because it's not coming from a conscious place. And therefore, when you tell them what to tell their anxiety, it doesn't work. Because their anxiety is not coming from a place of logical conversation that I could speak to it and say, you're too egotistical, or you're too insecure, or not people are not looking at you, or don't be so critical, which are all good messages. But if your anxiety is coming from a very deep unconscious place, the only way, like we say in halacha, keboiloi, kach poltoi. The way you got it in is the way you got it out. You get it out, which means you may need to really be able to at least appreciate this, that it may be so deeply rooted from an unconscious place, and therefore I'm unconsciously expressing and living this anxiety. And the way to identify that, the way to deal with that, therefore, is by a person appreciating how instinctive and deep it may be, and I have to have the courage to be able to go into that place, usually with the help of others. And of course, the deepest help comes from your core neshama, which is never anxious, because with all the anxiety, your deepest unconscious is always one with infinity, and therefore wholesome and confident and happy. But with the help of others, and with the help of your own core, and with the help of God, most important help, I have to really have the courage to be able to ask myself, and maybe I can't even ask myself, but to go into that place and help myself uproot the unconscious deep elements. One of the most powerful ways is, today it's very well known in psychology, the Rebbe spoke about this for many decades, and that's the koyach haguf. There's a famous, today it's a very well known book and discipline called The Body Holds the Score. The Baal Shem Tov taught that the guf has koyach ha'atzmos in it, meaning the body has the essence of Hashem in it. And therefore the body is holy and sacred and very, very physical, but in its physicality, it touches the essence that's beyond spirituality. Haguf nenem min haguf. And that's why very often the avodah with the body and in the body can help reach places that are beyond the mind.
I prefer the Rebbe's answer.
It's the same thing. Because the cool, I think what you're saying is actually an elaboration of this idea, because what the Rabbi Jacobsons are saying is that sometimes when you do something with the body, to get to the subconscious, you can't use logic, and the body speaks to the subconscious. That's why we have like repetitive behaviors or second natures. They become so deeply rooted that our body does, like in this autopilot state. And the chiddush is that sometimes when you do something physical with your body, that actually has the highest, the deepest effect actually on your consciousness. Not by talking yourself out of the problem, but actually doing yourself out of the problem. And this is the genius of what the Rebbe was saying, and this advice is, it's not just that it's about the action. It's actually action will actually transform your subconscious. That the Maisa will nimshach masalev. will actually transform your being from the inside. Doing something for another person gets yourself out of your own trauma and your own self, and that's what heals your subconscious.
I will add one thing as well, if I may. One of the themes in the Bosel Lagani Maimer is that there's Atzei Shittim, there's Shtus de Kedusha and Shtus de Lomazeh. So Shtus, some people translate as insanity, but let's call it obsession. And anxiety is a form of obsession, because that's why it's so powerful. You can't get rid of it. So one of the ways, and I think it's consistent with what's being said here, one of the ways to deal with an unhealthy obsession is to find a healthy obsession. Practically. Get yourself committed to something, to some cause, or to some volunteer work, and do it with shtus. An insanity that's beyond rational, with passion and that type of obsession. So you're channeling and harnessing the obsession that's going into self-destructive behavior, anxiety, and so on, addictions, another example, and be addicted to helping people, so to speak. So then you're taking, what my brother, Reb Pinson said, you're taking that so-called inner unconscious or subconscious powerful energy, you're turning it into a powerful energy to transform things. And you see this, people who can do that can literally change worlds because they have an obsessive nature. They have like an addictive nature. When it's channeled properly, it's very powerful. When it's not, it destroys you. It's like fire. But when it's harnessed, it can really change worlds.
This is a very sensitive question as well. First of earlier was also very sensitive. Person is struggling with severe mental illness, which causes a lot of challenges. He doesn't mention a mental disease, or she doesn't mention a mental disease, but a mental illness. The pain is very, very difficult, and it doesn't go away. I'm in treatment, I take medications, but the pain of it is very, very powerful. I'm looking for guidance, and I'm looking for chizuk, and something to give me more happiness in this predicament which I cannot get rid of. Also would like to hear from all, and I think again, let's do the 30-second model. I should start. This is a loaded question, obviously. I don't know, 30-second answer. What I would say is two things. First of all, I take my shoes off in front of you because I'm standing in front of holy space. Hashem has given you a challenge that you did not choose, and it must be that your soul, I know, has some incredible powers and was sent on a very powerful but painful mission. I think the most important thing is not to feel guilty, not to blame yourself, not to keep on second-guessing yourself, to create space for the real pain and predicament, because this is a very challenging situation. I think that's number one. You have to create space and be compassionate towards yourself and not try to repress and deny the fact that there's a very difficult journey here. And that means there's a room for crying and for sometimes sobbing, to really, because it's a very painful reality. I think together with that, you have to know that never define yourself as a mentally ill person in essence. Your soul is a piece of divine. That means you're a piece of infinity. And that means that at your core, you're a piece of divine light. And on the contrary, if you were sent into such a place, it means that your soul is so incredibly powerful that it can bring light into the darkest of places. What I would say is you need a very strong relationship with God, more than most people realize they need, to be able to say, as David HaMelech says, Gam ki elich begeitz halmavis, lo ira ra, ki ata imadi. Even when I walk in the shadow of death, I will not be terrified, because I know that you're with me holding my hand. I'm in a difficult place, but somebody is with you holding your hand.
In general, to the questions of this nature, we could say general points here, but to be honest, there's no one size fits all. It's case by case, and all the platitudes and general statements can help a bit, but it comes down to is God would never give a challenge that you cannot overcome. However, it's not always yourself, which means a person who's tied up in fetters and trapped cannot always free themselves. So I would advise, in addition to what my brother just said, and of course our hearts go out in the compassion, you must have people in your life. Because the harshest thing I find with whether it's mental illness or any other challenges people face is the loneliness that comes with it. Eicha Yoshva Boda, Yirmiyahu says, he doesn't speak about the Churban Beis Hamikdash, he doesn't speak about, in the beginning, he doesn't speak about the deaths, the Kolos and all that. What's his first statement? Alas, Eicha, look how sad it is that she sits alone. Yerushalayim is lonely. Because the loneliness is sometimes worse than the problem. Because the problem, if you knew someone was with you, with the Eibishter, a mentor, a friend, it makes it a lot easier. Doesn't take away the problem, but you're not alone. Like one Rebbe once said to a chassid, I'm not sure who it was, and said he had a great tragedy in his life. And the Rebbe said to him, Emphas hab ich nicht von dir, aber ich kann weinen mit dir. I don't have answers for you, but I can cry with you. And never minimize that power, because there's something about camaraderie, nichum avelim. How do we have the power to be menachem someone? We ourselves are in that situation. Because the Eibishter gave us kayach. So I would advise to you, whoever it is, or any one of us, when you know somebody, you must find a real friend, a real support system. Because they're going to be dark times and you need someone to lean on, someone you can talk to. And many of us don't want to do that because we don't want to be a burden on anyone and no one will understand me. There's always someone there that should. So I would say reach out and find the right person. And this is an individual, as I said, case-by-case basis. Everybody's another story. But that's what I would add to the equation.
There's not much to add. It's a good advice. When a person is in trouble, feeling pain, they should express it. Friendship or death. It says, this brings on Svarim that sometimes the neshamas come down to this world. In general, the reason why the neshama comes down to this world is to reach some type of tikkun. They have to elevate, they have to do something in this world. There's a zoyer tvei, there's a particular mitzvah that a person has to accomplish, a certain thing they have to refrain from. But then there's people that are born, chalila, that they have no capacity to do that. Let's say a child is born ill, whether it's physically ill or mentally ill, they don't really have a capacity to do that. So based on the Torah Sari, it's brought down that these are neshamas, these are souls that come down to this world not for their own tikkun. They come down to this world not for their own selves. These are very, very lofty, holy souls that they're so selfless that they choose to come down to this world just to help the people around them. It means that they don't need any reason to be in this world. They can be in Gan Eden, they can be in a higher place. And they choose to come down in this world impaired and physically and mentally unable to perform anything and really do anything because they come down to help other people reach their own tikkunim, their own elevations. So it's not that you're ever a burden on other people. On the contrary, you're helping other people achieve their own elevation of their soul. And one other thing, of course, every situation is different, is to try to find within all the struggle and all the pain and all the hardship, to try to find some level, if it's possible, some level of light, some level of something that you can do, that you can hold on to. And it could be just a few minutes a day or an hour a day, how long it is. It's just to create some space within your life that you feel like you're not just being a burden on other people, because everyone has something to contribute. to think about what is the one thing that I can do in this world that can be a little bit of contribution. Even though you don't need to do this because you have a perfect neshama and your neshama came out of this world only to help other people and give out. But if you can hold on to a little bit of light, a tiny glimmer of purpose and hope in your life, make sure that becomes like a focus in your life. That despite everything that you're doing throughout the day and how you're struggling, there's that moment of this oasis within time that you feel connected and you feel like you're doing something productive in this world.
We'll do one more question. People can ask if they want personally, or you could text any question you wish. 917-279-7579. 917-279-7579. 917-279-7579.
Can you send a donation there too? Why not?
Anytime. Okay, these are... A person is struggling. I do not have a good relationship with my children. They don't like me. I'm their father. I thought my children would love me. They don't. I don't see myself as being a bad father in this terms of, God forbid, abusive, but there's just something missing in the relationship. They just don't like me. There's no closeness. Please advise what can be done in such a situation. Okay. Huh? Suko? Let's do again the 30-second model.
Are you a Dug Machaya?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I would want to know more information before responding properly because there's always more details. This seems to me, Megal Tefach Mechaset Fachaim, like, I'd like to know, like, what is this like? The children just started hating the father at what age exactly? Is it from young age? What else is happening in their lives? How is the relationship between Shalom Bayis? I mean, there's too many factors here that are not being stated. I'm not, Chas v'Shalom, challenging the questioner, but to answer properly and not just like on a, like on a TV show to just be cute. To really answer compassionately and sensitively, there's a lot more that needs to be. Is there a mother involved? Do they hate the mother too? Are the children adults? Are they young? I mean, if I had to guess from my own experience when I hear lines like that, and this is not by any means, there's always exceptions, there's often a situation here where the father probably did some things that he's not talking about. Whether he knows it or not, I'm not sure, but that's vital. We need to know the facts here. So honestly, I don't want to go and speculate, because there are many scenarios here, and that coming from experience. I know you'll say, well, I'm avoiding the question, but I think from experience, I'd rather err on the side of, if you're really serious about your question, follow up. If you want to call me, you can call my brother, you can call Rabbi Pinson. If you're really serious about it and you really want an answer, you need to go speak to someone. I don't see us answering here without knowing those facts. Now, maybe my colleagues here have more insight into what this question is about, and maybe you have comments. Sure. I'm just telling you my thought on the matter.
It's hard to say anything now. I think Rabbi Simon is correct. It's very complicated to answer the question, but I would just say one thing. Again, there's variance that we have to really understand, but a lot of people make the mistake that your child is going to be your best friend. And it's lavdafka. It doesn't necessarily work this way. You are one type of person, and your child could be someone different. We're not trying to create friendships between parents and children. Sometimes you have one child that you really connect with because you feel connected to. Sometimes you can like the child, but necessarily means that you're the same style as that person. But I would just say in general, as a holistic thing, a very general thing, we have to relate to our children b'asher hu sham, from where they're at. The Gemara talks about, even on Shabbos, to play with your child. There's a famous mashal in the Maimon Chadoidi from the Magid of a ben that's Masachik in Zikla Shalaviv, a child that's playing with the beard of his father. If you want to have, in general, if you want to have a good relationship with your child, You have to know the world of the child. You have to know if you see your child playing Lego and they're 5 years old, and you're going to start telling them to do something else, you're not relating to them. You have to sit down on the floor and go to their level to see what excites them in their life at this point, to really understand the child. And this is also in terms of Yiddishkeit in general. You want to give the child a passion about Yiddishkeit, a love for Yiddishkeit. You can't talk to them about Madregas and Ruach HaKodesh. You can't talk to them about levels. You have to talk about what do they enjoy in this world and explain to them how that enjoyment is translated in their practice of Yiddishkeit. So to relate to the child as their child, Asher Hashem, I think is just a general idea.
In addition to both ideas, obviously well spoken and well articulated, I would just add another aspect which may be obvious, but I think it's good to look into, and that is, I would not try, again, we have to know the situation, but this is advice that works, I guess, in some situations at least, even if not all. But sometimes there may not be an issue, you have done something. As you say, you haven't done anything. But it may be that your children somehow don't feel or didn't feel your heart. They didn't feel your connection, even though technically you fulfilled all the obligations in the ksuva. And instead of focusing on the past and on guilt of the past, it's important to understand the past, but instead of wallowing in the past, what I would advise to you is ask yourself from tonight or from tomorrow morning, which is already tomorrow morning in a few minutes, and that is how I could get off my high horse and really try to be there at least a little bit with every child, sharing with them my heart, my soul, listening to them, spending time with them, tuning into them, focus on the future, create a new future. And even if you have to reinvent yourself in the sense that you have to go out of your comfort zone, that's what fathers do. That's what mothers do. So that's what I think, try to focus on the future and say, from today, what can I do to be able to be there with my child, to share my heart, to share my soul, to share my neshama. It shouldn't just be an intellectual, cerebral connection, but really to spend time with your body and your soul in their life in a way that they can feel it on their terms. That's what I would just articulate as well. These new ones keep on coming in. I heard that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said in his final years that the energy of the Geula is already here in the world. The energy of Mashiach is already here in the world. He said all that's left is to open your eyes, and when you open your eyes, you will be able to see the Levyasan and the Shor Habar, and see that everything is ready for the ultimate meal and for the ultimate Geula, and what's left is, he said, we should open our eyes. What does this mean? Why can't we open our eyes and see this as a reality? What does it even mean to open our eyes? And if it sounds so simple, so why aren't we opening our eyes?
On the chapter, but I asked something very similar.
So ask, and we'll answer together. Just loud so everybody can hear.
I asked, what's stopping Mashiach from coming? What is the thing we know all those lightness between them, but we're doing all this Sodom, Yisrael, Akros, etc., acts of Abbas, Abbasino, etc., so on and so forth. But what is the thing, the one thing that is stopping the Gula Mikdash Hashem is that be sort of problem, like in this physical world, I can see with our physical eyes, right? And then I asked after that, they said, why can't we open our eyes and see this as reality?
Yeah. So this is similar to what I asked before. He said, and what's stopping Mashiach from coming? In reality, I can't answer that question. These are, Hashem runs the whole world. You find that funny. And Hashem is going to decide the moment Mashiach comes, how Mashiach comes. And we hope and we daven and we pray to say, what's ultimately stopping it? I'm not in the position at all to answer that question. I'm so sorry. I would like to address, in very, very brief, mamish brief, something that is, I think, very profound about opening our eyes and seeing the consciousness of Geula. And I think it's important to be said. When people hear the word Chabad, it's right away Mashiach, right? There's a beautiful thing about that, and there's a toxic thing about that. The beautiful thing about that is that the Rebbe and Chabad are very busy with Mashiach, the Emunah Mashiach, preparing for Mashiach. The negative thing, I don't have to explain. The stereotypes, the alienation, it's Meshuggah, crazy, etc., lunacy, etc. I don't have to elaborate. But one of the truths about all of this is that in the last few years of his life, the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, started to articulate a language, speak a language that even though he spoke about it for many decades, but there was a unique, I would say, language or expressions that were very powerful, and in many ways he was trying to change the paradigms of people, of Jews, and of the world. And I think even many people who identify themselves as Chabad Hasidim, because they were born that way or they joined the movement, didn't even fully understand it, and perhaps many of us still don't fully understand it. And what am I going to say in 30 seconds? But if you can't say it in 30 seconds, you can't say it in 30 hours. And that is that the Rebbe, I think, earnestly felt that there's a new energy in the world now. Mamish, a new energy in the world, called the energy of Geula, a new energy in the Jewish people. And the energy is here. The question is only if I'm going to open my eyes and see it, or I'll close my eyes and not see it. And what this new energy means, that right now we live in a time that everyone is capable of experiencing full redemption in their life. And what does it mean, full redemption in their life? So he said, from the Medrash, the difference between Goyla, exile, and Geula, redemption, is one letter, Aleph, oneness. The ability to really be able to live in a way that I experience my life as completely enveloped by oneness. Not that suddenly making a living is easy now. We're still waiting for the ultimate Geula to be realized. And not that there's no challenges with children, not that there's no challenges with health or finances or problems in Israel or other issues. But that my consciousness could be one, that I'm completely with God 24 hours a day in the most serene space of oneness and redemption, even as I go through my journeys of life. And it's my choice to be able to feel the infinite love that could completely envelop me and my relationships and my encounters and my perspectives and every encounter that I have from the moment I awake till the moment I go to sleep, including during my sleep.
I would add two key points. Obviously, in addition to what my brother just said. We human beings, it's what they call in English, have myopic vision. If someone asks you, what's reality? What will you answer? Most people would say, the reality right now before my eyes is this tables in this room here, this tent. We hear a little light music playing in the background, a bunch of beautiful Jews gathered together. And that's what you see. We are seduced and distracted by our five senses. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, touch, and smell. So if you said, whether it's a scientist or it's a Badi Bar Seichel, what's reality? Most people will say what I see, what I touch is reality. But we all know that it's a little more than that. Now I'll ask you, okay, 1 second. How about Seichel itself, intelligence? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you don't really feel it. What about love? Ahava. What about a neshama, a soul? You can, God forbid, cut open a person, you're not going to find a soul. So suddenly you start thinking, you know what? There's more than what I see is not what you see is not what you get. There's more going on. I would submit that actually the most important things in life cannot be seen, not smelled, not tasted, not touched, and not heard. However, the way God created us, and this is an essential theme in Chassidus B'chlal, He created that we're trapped in the world of senses. And the fact is, a table to us is more tangible than the divine energy inside of it. The Lashon of the Alter Rebbe, Shayechet V'Amunu, Ilo Nitten, Rishus La'ayin Lires. Ayin, eyes. If permission was given to the eye to see, existence wouldn't exist. The Eibishter had to conceal it, or else we would not be independent entities. The whole concept of Tzimtzum is we'd have no independent consciousness. There's no independent consciousness, there's no bchira, no free will. There's no free will, there's no purpose. So the question is, when the Eibishter made this Tzimtzum, thousands of years have passed, what has happened in history? In the language of Chassidus, we've been battling with this Tzimtzum. Every tzaddik, every Beini, every Jew, every human being that made an effort to not be selfish, but to be giving, to think a little about the purpose of their lives, not just their survival, in some way have pierced the Tzimtzum and somewhat diminished the concealment. Now anyone with Seichel understands, if God created the world with a purpose, there is an end to the process. That's why I find it sometimes a pella. I understand the Rebbe and Chabad made it popular. But why do you think Mashiach is one of the Yud Gimel Ikr? The Rambam says a Ikr. In other words, what's an Ikr? Chmon al-Islam, someone doesn't believe in Shabbos, that's not an Ikr. But if you don't believe in the Eibishter, you don't believe the Torah is bin Hashamayim, Nitzchi, you don't believe Mashiach, it's all part. Why is Mashiach? Let's say someone says, I believe in Tayyag Mitzvahs. I don't know if Mashiach is ever going to come. You know what the problem is? That means you don't believe in God. Because if God created the world for a purpose, do you believe this purpose will be realized? Imagine someone's driving a train. They say, he's a great driver. I love him. He's the best. But where is he going? I don't know if he has a destination. I don't even know if he'll ever get there. So it's fundamental to the faith of Torah and Mitzvahs and the Eibishter that there's a purpose that will be realized. So the question is, so why do we find it so difficult to believe Mashiach is going to come tonight? You know why? Because it's symptoms that it's worked well. Very easy to delude ourselves that here we're living in this reality and this is it. The Rebbe, who had open eyes, and Chochem Einav Bereishet, remember Seichel, you could have, the Rebbe once told a chassid, Asadot divo schlofen mit vermachte Egen beim Farbrengen und Reif schlofen mit offene Egen. There's some that sleep with closed eyes and some sleep with, and many sleep with open eyes. You can have your eyes open and not see a thing. So the Rebbe was saying the following: history is not going nowhere. It's thousands of years. How much Mesiras Nefesh did our grandparents have? You tell me. Billions of mitzvahs, trillions of mitzvahs, sacrifices. We're not even talking about the last 100 years. So is this all to naught? What happened to all of this? What happened to every mitzvah that was done? Did it die with them? It accumulated. Any Maimon says that all these mitzvahs, the Yichud Zen Nitzchi, we may not see it, but we believe that when you used a table for the Kedusha, or a cloth for film, that it changed the Gashmistic world. You and I don't see it because we're limited vision. We don't even see subatomic particles. We don't even see electricity. You're going to go see divine energy. But there is electricity. So the Rebbe is saying that all this has accumulated. And at some point it's going to erupt. At some point there's a Moshel Chassidus, Munach B'Kufsa. The Rebbe brings it in his first Maimer. That it's like in a chest. All this energy has accumulated, but you know what? It's right beneath the surface. Just like when a volcano erupts. No one knows it's going to erupt, but there's energies building up for years and years. And then also the Malyusa, the same is true. And the Rebbe is saying, how he knows, that's what the Rebbe is about. I don't know how he knows, but he knows. And he's saying, there is a point where all the goodness and all the kindness and all the tzedakah and yesher and mitzvahs and Mesiras Nefesh has accumulated. And I'm telling you what, we see it in the world today. We see it, and the Jews have never had freedom like we have today. I'm not saying the world is perfect. We can be at Frume Id Vidu Wilst. There's no Gzedis, no one's watching who came into this tent tonight, no one's going to arrest us, etc., etc. I'm not saying there are still halamas v'estadim, but comparing it If our grandparents saw this world, they think it's a Mashiach world. According to Shmuel, Ein b'yemei Mashiach lo yilmazel, shibud malchus levad. What shibud malchus do we have besides paying parking tickets and taxes? So we live in a very powerful world, and if you open your eyes, simply think about it. The individual rights we have, the ability to do anything we wish, and the only mania, you know what, is today inside. It's gleichgültigkeit, it's apathy. The battle is within, so the Rebbe, as a true Rebbe, is saying something that maybe nobody thought of. Wake up, open your eyes, and recognize there's a new reality emerging. And the only mania right now is you. Once upon a time, there were Nazis. That is Exedem Umayla. Today you don't have that. You don't have Amalek. Today the Ra is in our power. There's no force in this world that stops you from being a Yiddish Shamayim, except your own thoughts. Once upon a time we didn't have that control. And there's more to be said on this. So the Rebbe, and I encourage everyone, I'm very glad this question was asked because it's such a fundamental theme to the Rebbe's whole approach that he began 70 years ago. It wasn't just more mitzvahs and bring more Jews. That's all beautiful. But it's leading to a destination. We want to reach the destination. And the fact that we not comfortable with it, that means even more reason why we need a Rebbe to tell us. Why? Because why are we not comfortable? Because we're not used to it. We're used to this world. The language of Chassidus is elikus, is b'yischatshus, and elam is b'pshittus. What's real to you? Your body. You need to be taught there's a neshama. You wake up in the morning, you feel tired or hungry. You don't feel your neshama's thirst, in most cases. Mashiach will come, you'll feel the neshama's thirst naturally. And the Rebbe, coming from a neshamadika perspective, says now we can all have a taste of it. Can move on. The Eibishter still has to do his part. But do a little of your part. See the Aleph, as my brother said, in the Gela. And you can find it many different ways. Just anything you're doing, look, what is it that would be Kvedish al HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that thing? You send an email. Maybe you should send an email not just for business purposes or for entertainment or for nonsense. Send an email and remind someone a good thought, a good inspiration, something kind. Then you take in technology and you put the Aleph of Aluf Shleilim or of Agdus into it. And there's thousands of examples. Time is limited here, and I would give a lot more, but I want to respect the time and my colleagues and so on. But this is something that, if you're going to take a takeaway message, this is the takeaway message. That you and I and our children and our families, every day, find a few ways to bring the Aleph. Remind, we're sitting by breakfast. Let's see how this breakfast can be seen in the Guladika eyes. All you have to do is think about the Eibishter. And then in other areas of life, in any area, in all your ways you know God, flesh itself, even very physical physiology, the stars in heaven, everything is at Boyesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These are all meant to be examples, Misholim, of how we understand Getlichkeit. It's a mosht. So to say we can do it all 24/7, begin with one thing a day. Begin with 10 things a day. That's called opening your eyes. So it's going to have open eyes, but you're seeing with things with a new perspective. L'chaim.
To just take it a little bit, there's one thing to see Hashem's presence in the world, and this is a gewaldige thing, and hopefully you can live with this always. And then there's a Mashiach to look. There's an Ohr that came down to this world, Toras Baal Shem. And the Ohr was nimshach and was drawn and was revealed further and further. I told the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe. I just want to use a few oisias, and then to understand what this is, let's use a few little language. That 7 is Malchus. And Malchus is the container that receives from everything that's up before it. And it's also becomes the keser, becomes the crown for everything below it. And just like in the process of the spheres, the way things develop, it first comes to Chachma, then to Bina, then to Das. It's actually the koyach ruchni, the spiritual quality, moves from one level until it receives to malchus. V'yesh loimer lefi ani is daiti. That there's also a progression in the way the Rebbe revealed Torah throughout the 40 years that he taught. With the origin goes back already in Yud Aleph Shvat, Tafshin Aleph. But its finality was finally revealed in the Keser of the Malchus, which is we call in the last few years that the Rebbe taught, revealed, and this was very much what the Rebbe spoke about in those years, was about Mashiach. And this is the Ohr Keser. And what this means is, first let me say what the idea is, and I'll try to unpack it a little bit. That the idea of the Ohr Keser, the light of Keser, is, it's going back to the Torah of Baal Shem, to reveal a new light. So the new light, just like when you wear a crown on your head, the crown contains all the opposite parts of the body. So it has the right hand, the left hand, and it has the different structures and positions of the body. But the keser, the crown on the head, is the container, is the context, is what holds the entire structure of the body. So that means, in Avodah, the idea of the keser is Mashiach. And in our personal life, in the Olam HaPrati, in our own individual life, that the Nachal of Ruach Hashem, Ruach HaChmabin, Ruach Yitzchak, that the Moranim says that it's talking about the Mashiach Shebekir Boy, the element of Mashiach that exists within every Yid. That is the element of the Keser that's revealed. And the Keser is revealed in all the issues that your person has. And what is the Keser? The Keser is the Ohr of Keser, which is the Ohr Yechida, the Ohr Yechida Shevat Nefesh, the light of Yechida Shevat Nefesh, is that the Rebbe wanted to reveal that processes, you can get to things through processes, and then you can get to something instantaneously. There's two types of avodah. There's the avodah that happened up until this present moment, up until this modern era, where things evolved in processes, just like the world evolved in processes. But when it came to this modern era, what's the chiddush of the modern era? Instantaneously. Things happen instantaneously. This is the great revelation that the Zohar predicted, that in 1740, 1840, there'll be a revealing of the Chachma, Tachtoina, of the lower waters, which will be unified with the higher waters. The lower waters showed that everything can happen in one moment. You don't have to wait for processes. You can get everything as instant. Because there was a revelation of the Ohr and the Chitzonius and the external part of the world of instant gratification or instantaneous communication, this shows that there is an Ohr Ruchni that came down to this world. That the world is revealing now a new type of avodah. Normally, a person needs to work through his midas, he has to work through his nehi, then he has to work through his netzach, and his hoid, and yisoid, and then work through his chesed, and gvura, and tiferes, and finally, at the end of the day, finally get ulai, hai, ulai, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, that maybe you're finally going to reach some level of yechidah, of a level of a tzaddik. And it's a process, and it's a long avodah. This is the avodah of the Beni, the struggler. I had a Zayda, Zal Moshe, a very famous chassid, a tzaddik. Someone asked him, Zal Moshe, Vim de Greichman, how do you reach a spiritual plateau? He was a very sharp Yid, he was a shtickle Kotzker style. And he said, 20 Jahre is kafia, 20 Jahre is hapcha, 20 Jahre samarvav, 20 Jahre davenen, und nach dem gar nicht. It says 20 years you work on breaking yourself, 20 years on transforming yourself, 20 years you learn these deep maimorim, 20 years you daven, and this is a person that davens every day 6 hours, and he says at the end of the day you have nothing. Because when you're working through processes, the definition is that midegrech, you reach it, but it's temporary. Ulay haiva ulay, maybe yala ruach memorim, and you're going to have a bechinas ibur, you're going to get impregnated from a bechin of tzaddik. The Rebbe, in the beginning of writing the Siyas, already hinted to this, that there's a new Ohr coming out to this world. In 1950 it wasn't so revealed, but in 1990 it was. And it's parallel. That the Ohr that came down to this world is that the Rebbe used oisius that are, the Rebbe even said this on his own, he said these are frightening words. And he says, there comes a time already that every person has to call himself a Rebbe. What does this mean? I don't know what exactly it means, but this is what I think it means. Is that we, just like instantaneously we can get everything in this world, physically we can get all information, the same thing Ruchnius. Ruchnius, we just have to open our eyes. We have to change our mindset from thinking that we're a struggler, and we have struggles and we overcome, to thinking that we are actually, in our essence of who we are, we're actually tzaddikim. Who are you? It's not that the nefesh Hashem is b'Yisrael, that really I identify myself with nefesh Abamis. Lakai, Neshama, Shenesat the B, who's the B, who's the I? The I is the ego. Shenesat the B, the one that he gave me, is my neshama. You have to start identifying yourself that, no, I am a nefesh alikis. I'm a chelek elikam imal mamash. That's mitziusi. That's who I am. So who am I? I live with dveikus. I live with wonder. I live with openness. I live with love. I live with caring for another person. I live with edelkeit. I live with hecherkeit. This is what the gal, there's the gal of Golus, and there's a gal of Gula. The gal of Golus is revealing that I'm stuck and I'm trying to get somewhere. The gal of Geula, which is the Aleph, is Lashon Pella, like the Maharal writes. The Aleph is to live with the Pella, the wonder, the magic, the psh, look at this world. When you wake up in the morning, do you say, I am going to have a hard day? Or you say, Moida ani lefonecha. There was once a child that asked Rabbi Suchan, the Rebbe's mother, he brought a little, the groceries to her house. And he asked the Rebbe's mother, please tell me, what is the Rebbe's favorite passage in davening, in prayer? What's the favorite thing? What's the favorite? What's his favorite passage? She said, I don't know. I'll ask him. He said, no, don't ask him. She said, no, I want to ask him. I also want to know. I want to know for myself. And she came back and she told him that the Rebbe's favorite passage in davening was Moidani Lefanacha. This is why it's interesting that Kuntas Toras Chassidus was based on this passage. Moidani Lefanacha. What is Moidani Lefanacha? You wake up in the morning and the first thing you say is Ani Lefanacha. Thank you, Hashem, I'm in your presence. And not, I have a mortgage to pay, I'm having a problem with chinuch, I don't have shalom bayis. That's the keser that has all the struggles. The keser contains all those things. So you're not saying that I'm oblivious to these problems. But when a person opens up their eyes and has instant tzitkus, not in a state, not that you become a tzaddik 24 hours a day. Maybe not. And maybe you're going to fall. And maybe because of that, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Perek Chav Zayin, you're going to have depression. Because because you don't understand that you're not yet a tzaddik. We're not talking about a madrega. We're not talking about a state. We're talking about a stage. A oifen. The oifen, the way I relate to this world is in a way that my eyes are wide open. And what does it mean that? An attitude. A consciousness. When a person lives with a consciousness that I know, it's clear, I know what I have to do in this world. I know what my purpose in this world is. I'm dovuk to the Eibishter. I feel Hashem's presence. Then when they deal with the details of their life, which are the struggles, the Geula Pratis, the personal redemption, does not affect the outside external reality yet. But it changes your attitude towards that reality. Everything. Everything in life is about an attitude. You can be in prison and be free, and you can be free and be in prison. It depends on your mindset. If you look at your life and you say, my connection to the Eibishter is permanent. I'm living with Gadlus HaMoichen, with expansive mind, with Moichen the Gadlus. I'm living with dveikus. I'm living with sitkus. This is who I am. I'm an erlicha person. I'm a dohoivina person. I live a higher life. And then when you catch yourself falling, say, but sepasnisht. It's not befitting for a person that could open their eyes. And to live like a tzaddik, how could I be screaming at my child? How could I be upset that something didn't go my way? How could I have anger? So instead of thinking yourself that you are part of the problem, and you're trying to work yourself out of the problem, recognize that you're higher than the problem. That's Geula. Geula is to open our minds and our mindset and our eyes to see that everything that we need is right present in front of us. It's not, in actuality, but that doesn't matter. Because that's the narrative of life. That's the story you're telling yourself. Start telling yourself a different story. This is the Gilui of Torah Baal Shem Tov to the Dor HaShvi. This is the revealing of the Torah Baal Shem that went through so many generations of iskafia and ishapcha and work and hard avoida. And the Rebbe revealed in the last few years in the Nuns that everything can happen instantaneously. We just have to switch the mindset from thinking ourselves as Golas Yidden to think ourselves as Gula Yidden. And we open our eyes, we start seeing Gula in our own lives and in the lives of all of our friends. L'chaim, l'chaim. Yeah.
He's saying no practice. No practice. Internet.
Just do it.
Internet.
Instant. Instant.
Shekayach, everyone. I'm going to try to help bring Mashiach, and you'll do your part here. It was a pleasure. Yitzchak is my brother, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, Shekayach to you and to all the hosts and everyone.
My brother for coming all the way from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Long to see you.
Long to see
All
you.
the Achanas,
Yeah.
all the other avodah that was involved in preparing this. Thank you so much.
And leave you in able hands.
Absolutely.